Now,
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let's keep the chat going now with Jenna Clark, of course, from the West Australian, Triple M, and, of course, here on Sky News with the front page. And Senators Tony Sheldon from the Labor Party and Hollie Hughes, both representing New South Wales. Now, let's quickly talk about Green Keen here for a second. Now, I tell you what, Tony, you've got to be loving this, right? This bloke who you know, apparently a factional leader of the Liberal Party at one point in time, who is going around the federal government to outdo the Labor Party when it comes to not just dramatic action on climate change, but changing the things that consumers can buy. I mean, literally, you couldn't hope for a better each-way agent. You couldn't hope for a better double agent. Can you now finally admit that this bloke was a long-term plant from Sussex Street? You built him in a lab and it worked.
Well, Paul, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but he's not. And I'll explain a couple of reasons why. But I'll take up your first point, and that is that I'll just quote Andrew Cannell said today that Matt Keane likes poking Scott Morrison in the eye and demonstrating policy differences, and that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we want to be really mindful of in this move on the electrical cars is a really important step, but it's also has to go further, and it also has to have a proper sense about it. If you're actually going to incentivise people to buy electric cars, you also have to make sure you look at registration costs that other countries have. You should be looking at the sorts of payments and tariffs that are put on these cars as luxury cars. Those tariffs should be dealt with, which Labor's announced in addition to deal with. But I think one of the things that's most telling about it is that the Minister Keane did actually really drop Scott Morrison in it today, because he said, with the announcement on having these charging stations, that there hasn't been discussions with the New South Wales government.
Yeah.
Like that means there's lack of coordination. That is against the national interest. They need to talk to states federally, and it just sort of starts to sound like, they've got all announcement, no plan, because you've got a plan with states as well, so you're not duplicating and you're getting best bang for your taxpayers' buck.
Yeah, but Hollie, on the other side of things is that when you turn around and say, we're going to incentivise this, we won't tax that, at a point you have to come to a conclusion about, well, that's going to cost the federal budget, right? So right now, fuel excise. Fuel excise is $20 billion a year once you put together your diesel and your other petrol taxes, okay? I want someone somewhere to tell me what is the replacement. Now, last night we had the electric vehicles lobby group on here who openly talked about maybe, you move from registration to sort of, paying tax by the number of kilometres that you use. But this again, and it's like the renewable energy thing, I don't have a problem with the concept of renewable energy. I have a problem with people who won't tell you that it costs money to build it, that it has environmental consequences to build it. If they're honest about that, then you can finish the argument with, and in the end, in 20 years' time, the energy's cheaper. But people have to say that either the federal budget is going to go into $20 billion of deficit every year, or there's going to be an alternative way to get the revenue. Otherwise, they're just talking in service of a bumper sticker.
Well, I can assure you, if it's a coalition-led federal government, we won't be going into deficit $20 billion per year. And this is why when we're talking about a shift to renewables, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's an adoption of hydrogen, whether it's adoption of lithium-ion batteries, whatever it is the technology takes over in the emissions discussion and how technology is going to move this debate forward, it's not going to be driven by legislated mandates that somehow or other we're going to have to put an impost in business or families because it's legislated at a certain level and the government is going to tell you what you're going to do. I can tell you there is no one in this government, there is no one sitting on the Labor opposition or in the Greens or anywhere else in the crossbench, and particularly probably no one in the bureaucracy, that is smarter than our scientists and our industry and those that are leading the innovation in this area. I would much prefer to see those at NAIR at the University of Newcastle to be incentivised to work out how we're going to move these things forward without us dictating to them what it's got to look like and what the exact cost imposts are going to be and how they're going to occur. We used to have phones that we, run around to dial a number. We don't have them anymore. None of us thought our phones were going to be something that ran our lives and had everything on them. But none of that innovation was driven by government dictating it to it. And I think this is where we need to be careful. It's not about government saying, this is where we're going to land and this is how we're going to get there. It's about providing the incentive to those that, quite frankly, are much smarter than all of us, including the four of us here tonight. They're going to drive the innovation. And then we look at how we do the costs around it and how we work on it.
Well, you say that, Senator, but you've never seen
determining-
Jenna Clark in the lab coat. I mean, it is very effective and she can
Mate,
get
I'm never going
things
to see
done.
Jenna Clark again.
I wear glasses.
She's stuck in the WA prison. I'm never going to see Jenna Clark. She's never going to be allowed to join us in the real world again.
That's right. We could just write notes on the GST money that we send each other. It'd be like special messages being sent through prison, right? You know, baking things into cakes.
Jen, I'll send you a lab coat.
Yeah, all right. Now,
I'll bring my glasses.
Enough on climate because, we're banged on about that a lot tonight. So let's get to some other things. We all know that people can be particularly crazy on the internet, but there's a particular branch of anti-vaxxers that we know are particularly nasty. Now, I cannot stand, and I can't believe I'm about to be standing up for, but anyway, a bloke who is the upper house member for animal justice in Victoria. Now, he's a regular vote for the Labor Party, and he is one of the 3 votes that is necessary for Daniel Andrews' appalling new blank checkbook of powers when it comes to pandemics. Now, most likely he will vote for this, but the people who are coming after him, Jenna, in a particularly harsh fashion. Death threats, all the rest of it here, and apparently he's a disgrace to veganism.
Yeah, Paul, I don't think when you want to incite the crazies, you definitely don't want to spark off with the anti-vaxxers and then have the Venn diagram of the vegans coming for you, because I feel that is particularly dangerous because these people are extreme to the nth degree. So, look, my heart goes out to what this man must be experiencing in his private life, because obviously death threats and threats to his family and even his pets, I believe, that were made is completely unacceptable. But this is just the extremes of which people will go to. I just don't even know when it's going to stop. Is it going to stop when we see all borders open, and as we see today, when like the federal government announced, we want to get out of your lives and kind of let everything get back to normal? Because I just don't know where is the end point here. We've seen the horrific scenes out of the UK where we've seen a number of MPs murdered in their own, backyards because there are extreme people in the environment, and we don't want to get to a place where our MPs are not accessible, because that's what we love about our democracy here. And so I'm all for, if you want to protest peacefully, go right ahead. But I draw the line when you start threatening the lives or the safety of other people, specifically MPs.
And also, Tony, just because I'm saying that the threats against this bloke does not mean that I think he should, as a result, turn around, grow a pair and vote for the bill. I don't think he should vote for the bill. But for obvious reasons, you have to turn around and say that even something that might be happening to the person I would never agree with, I still have to agree that the principle of what is happening to them is completely unacceptable. So, I mean, you remember on all the different parts sort of that you've been through in your life when things can get a bit fired up. But some people, they just go troppo on things, don't they?
They do just sometimes lose it. And, part of this whole question about social media and people taking down rabbit holes. But also, I think importantly, we should actually also think about the fact that everyone deserves to be heard. Like, they all deserve to be heard about what people's views are, but we have to make sure that we're doing it in the solutions are a COVID-safe way that's not going to impact negatively on the community. That's just, to me, sort of basic common sense. And to see threats of violence against children, against his children, threats of kidnapping, and I think one of the most pressure points that was applied in the article that I read was that having material put into his letterbox, his home address, threatening his family, that's a pretty disgusting and despicable way to operate, and I wouldn't expect any decent Australian to do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, again, how do you deal with the crazies, Hollie? Because I know when you've spoken out about disability policies, there were people who really came after you, even though, of course, you were speaking as a very well-informed, not just senator, but mum in this area as well. People on whatever it is.
I've had the anti-vaxxers. I had the anti-vaxxers tell me, C word, go hang yourself. And when I hadn't done it the next day, they very kindly offered to come and assist me if I was having problems with that. My staff make regular referrals to the AFP. We have to keep lists. We have regular contact with the AFP because of ongoing threats and ongoing issues that occur both through social media and other means. But For women in politics, this is particularly something of concern, but it's also something I raised when we had the March for Justice, or whatever they called it, which was this alleged support for all women. It's not support for all women, it's support for women on the left. Women on the right, we deserve it, and we get told that regularly, quite often by women on the left. So we need to improve the social discourse in this country. We need to do it considerably because we are in a very, very nasty place at the moment across the board. And what Jenna made the point, already politicians in Australia and our staff are being advised with regards to how we connect with voters, how we engage with them because of what has happened in the UK. And Australian politics has always been particularly accessible. I know a lot of my colleagues regularly hold, politics in the pub. They hold very open.
You want to be really
events.
open.
I hosted one on Monday in the Hunter with the Prime Minister. But when these threats become so overwhelming and you can't do that anymore, it's actually to the detriment of broader society that they'll no longer be able to engage with their elected politicians because, unfortunately, our lives are being threatened. And this isn't a joke.
Yeah.
When they're putting threats in your family's letterbox, it's saying, I know where you live.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's all the people in our lives who have nothing to do with the politics or the media and all the rest of it. And that, in part, is, of course, what it's all meant to scare. But you wouldn't be human if you weren't. Senators, I'll leave you there. Thank you very much. Jenna, I've got one last question for you, which is we had a conversation last year about a disgraceful situation where there was a poor little girl who died after being turned away from a Western Australian hospital. Reports have now come out that a mixture of overworked and tired and all the rest of it here. Now, let's say very quickly, that overworked and tired is nothing to do with COVID. All right, park that garbage. The West Australian health system has been a basket case for a long period of time, just like multiples. In fact, every single month in the lead up to the West Australian election. And I get it. I might seem like, the one person still fighting World War II. But the reality is the last 5 months in the lead up to the election, hospital ramping got worse and worse and worse. And as a result of what happened here, a little girl died. She was turned away and died. What's been the reaction in Western Australia, and what's the BS promises we're hearing from the Emperor?
Yeah, it's just horrific. And like you said, Paul, a little Ash warrior, she was 7 years old. She died in Perth Children's Hospital, which is a world-leading research hospital when it comes to paediatric care. She died in the ED after waiting for 2 hours where she received no help. So a report has been handed down by an independent body this week. It was tabled in Parliament yesterday. 30 recommendations have been highlighted. But again, there is nothing really in this report that is new to what we haven't been hearing already from nurses, overworked frontline health workers, doctors. And I know, look, the AMA and the Australian Nurses Federation WA chapter, they are unions, so they are going to come out a little bit stronger against this. But we learnt nothing that we didn't already know. I spoke to the nurses union yesterday and they said, look, if we keep going the rate we're going, 7 WA hospitals are going to have to close because of understaffing and exhaustion and burnout, because nurses and doctors just can't cope anymore. And we don't even have COVID. So it's really terrifying. Today, the Premier was at odds with the Health Minister, Roger Cook, which was really concerning. He basically said that, look, in the report, it said that the Perth Children's Hospital was not understaffed on that night where Ash warrior died, but in the report, it said that it was suboptimally staffed. So I guess it all comes down to semantics, but at the end of the day, this poor family and the death of Ash warrior needs to stand for something, and the family have been so brave in speaking out and saying we need to see change so this doesn't happen again. And hopefully we here at the West Australian and other media outlets around the country, specifically in WA, continue to beat this drum, because it's just not good enough for a country, for a state that has a $5 billion operating surplus.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a disgrace. It truly is. Good on you for keeping up the campaign. And I just wanted to give that little moment because that little lady and her family, who will not give up, absolutely deserve it. Thank you, Jenna. Seen about an hour with the front pages. Very hard-working lady, working both ends of the day. I know what that feeling's like at the moment because I'm filling in for Steve Price, doing a little bit of radio. It's not a Sky News thing, but doing it for the Listener app, which is part of the Southern Cross family. So if you want to get up in the morning and listen to the Listener app, you'll get me for a week. But the main game is always Sky News all day, every day, and plenty more here on Paul Murray Live.